everybody. Welcome to Shadow at Night. This is Tuesday, March the 25th, 2025. A special show tonight featuring retired undercover police detective from Toronto, Donald Best. We are going to break down the guilty verdict of Helen Grus, former Ottawa police detective Helen Grus. Today she was found guilty of one charge of disreputable conduct after what seems like 2 years on trial. And she wasn't even on trial. This was just a police kangaroo court, if you will, with the adjudicator, Chris Renwick, finding her guilty as of this morning. So will she appeal? What's her penalty going to be? We're going to find all of that out in the coming days. Donald Best is going to join us and break this all down. And in case you guys don't know this story, we're going to go right back to the beginning as to what Helen did. And then we're going to carry it through all the way until today. Donald has been following this thing ever since it began a couple of years ago. He is the expert on this, and I'm happy, very happy to have him on the show tonight. As always, the Shadow at Night live stream is brought to you by CanadaNanoSilver.com.
And Crest toothpaste to SilverCeuticals toothpaste. First, we're starting out with Crest. It's a classic, it's an original. It's what I've used most of my life. But that being said, it does have its problems. First off, the consistency is so weird and thick, and I get it's a paste, but it really doesn't spread that well. And I must also say that I'm not in love with the taste. I get toothpaste isn't supposed to taste good, but why shouldn't it? But that being said, it does get the job done. Next, we have SilverCeuticals. They have 3 flavors, but today we're going with Bubbleberry. And already it smells so good. So I'm excited to see what this tastes like. The consistency is also a lot smoother, and I must say it spreads way nicer in your mouth.
This literally tastes like fruit bubblegum.
Yeah, this toothpaste was pretty good. I actually went in for seconds, and it's infused with nano silver, so it helps remineralize your teeth and keep them fresh throughout the day.
100% go with SilverCeuticals.
And here's the results. What's your favorite toothpaste?
CanadaNanoSilver.com. Again, that is CanadaNanoSilver.com. Get a hold of Kevin and Anna for all the information you need on these awesome products at 204-808-9292. Go to the website. They'll be in Calgary for the National Women's Show coming up at the beginning of April. More information, again, is on their website, CanadaNanoSilver.com. Some quick hellos. Giselle is watching tonight. Darren is watching tonight. Margie is watching in Spruce Grove, Alberta tonight on Facebook. On X, Rita's watching. Sashid is watching on Facebook in Kingston, Ontario. Hello, Tammy, watching in Roblin. Linda's watching in Saskatchewan. Michael is watching tonight from Brampton. Sandra in Saskatchewan. Tony's watching in Calgary on X tonight. Lorette is watching in St. Jean-Baptiste, Manitoba. Dan, Lolita, Gloria, Hope, Diane, all you fantastic people. And over on Rumble tonight, we've got Dryson, Glaw, Lawrence, Fart Knocking, Pooh Head. Notables watching tonight. Dokar, Goshi 26, Jasmine Cat, Susie Q57. Whatever platform you guys are watching on tonight, do not forget, like and share. Get this out to as many people as you possibly can. It's an important show tonight. Our guest, Donald Best, joins the show right after this 30-second break. And here I am. So, yeah, let's, you know what? I forgot the word. It was a police tribunal, Donald, that was being held. This was not a court, actually. This was a tribunal that the police could do anything they pretty much wanted to do and did do to Helen and her attorney, Beth Sheba Vandenberg, over the past couple of years. Welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on. I know you've got a busy day, so we'll try and get you out of here as quickly as we possibly can. But first, can we go back to the beginning of all this? What did Helen do wrong? And I know that's going to seem like a trick question to people who know this inside and out.
Well, first of all, you got it right. Kangaroo court. Kangaroo court is what it was.
Yeah.
And this verdict was no surprise to anyone who's been following this case. I called it a year and a half ago. Kangaroo court, the fix is in. By the way, I have on my website, donaldbest.ca, donaldbest.ca. I have an entire tab with all the stories, my stories and other people's stories about this case, because this case is probably the most important case in policing history in 150 years.
Yeah.
And you'll see why that is. We have fundamentally changed the way we police now in Canada. We used to be on the British model, 150 years old, Sir Robert Peel. That's all gone now. And Detective Grus judgment really goes into that. It takes away the discretion from police officers across this country. So what happened? Detective Helen Grus, award-winning police officer, Ottawa Police, and she had about 20 years on when in 2019, 2020, the purported pandemic and the lockdowns hit, and the vaccines came along. And by November, December 2021, people started realizing that things were happening. Now, Detective Grus worked in what was called the SACA unit, Sexual Assault and Child Abuse Unit. And it was their duty to investigate sudden infant deaths or unexpected infant deaths that happen outside of hospitals. And Detective Grus's squad started discussing that there were double or triple the number of unexpected baby deaths in a recent period, and this is in fall and winter of 2021. And it was a discussion in the squad that they had triple the unexplained baby deaths.
How many baby deaths, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Donald, usually in a city like Ottawa, and I'm not sure if you'd have a number like this, but like how many babies die? I mean, this is not something people think about very often, right?
Right, and die under such circumstances that it's unexplained, unexpected. And the answer is, for this cluster of infant deaths, when the SACA unit identified it, was about 9, and in a period where they usually have about 2 or 3.
Okay, thank you.
And even worse than that, in the winter, or the early winter of 2021, there were 2 baby deaths where the infants died in their mother's arms. Now, this is so rare that we heard during the trial, during the tribunal, from a prosecution witness who was an expert in investigating baby deaths and supervising the investigations. This detective has supervised over 500 investigations into unexplained infant deaths. That's really something. And he testified under oath that in all his time and his decades on the police service and looking at these deaths for the Ontario committee that looks at them, he couldn't remember maybe one death where the child died in its mother's arms. Usually it's a crib death, usually it's the child was sleeping, something like that. But to have a child die in its mother's arms, it's a 1 in 500 occurrence. And in Ottawa, we had 2 in a matter of weeks. So this is what Detective Grus is looking at. And she
now, look, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Were the police called by anybody about these deaths, or did it just happen to come across their screen one day, or did they see it in a newspaper? How did the police find out about this?
The police get involved whenever there's an unexplained infant death outside of a hospital. So the police are called.
Okay.
And whether it's called by the ambulance attendants or the initial 911 call, the police go there, and it's usually a uniformed patrol officer who will arrive first. But then they contact, as per the procedures, they contact the SACA unit, and the SACA unit does an investigation. So all those investigations go into a central record storage system, and everything's in there. The radio call, the reports that were written, maybe statements from the witnesses, from the parents, the questioning of the parents, maybe a coroner's report, maybe not. It just depends. So it's just normal. This is what happens. So Detective Grus was not assigned to investigate any of these 9 deaths. It's a large squad. Somebody else was assigned to investigate these deaths. But everybody's talking about them. And everybody's talking about the fact that 2 children died in their mother's arms. 1 in 500 occurrence. We had 2 in Ottawa in a few weeks. So Detective Grus wondered.
Was there any? I'm sorry to.
Yeah.
I just, when these babies died in their mother's arms, was there any sign of distress at all that the baby was ill, or was it just a sudden baby stops breathing, mother freaks out, tries to wake the baby back up, and it doesn't happen? Like, how did that go down?
Okay. The 2 that died in their mother's arms were lively, alive, and then they were dead. That's my understanding.
Okay.
Okay. And some of the others, a couple were under circumstances that turned out to be, couldn't have had anything to do with the vaccine. Detective Grus wondered if it was anything to do with the vaccine, the COVID vaccine. So in any event, that's where it was in the fall of 2021. And Detective Grus started an investigation, or a preliminary investigation. Gee, I wonder. And then there was a leak of some Pfizer documents, which were eventually, a court ordered them all released the following summer in 2022. And you probably know what we saw there. We saw evidence that during the original tests of the vaccine, the Pfizer vaccine, 30 out of 32 babies died in the womb. 2 were born and 1 died afterwards. So out of 32 pregnancies, which were unintended, they didn't test it on pregnant women, but the women got pregnant. Out of those 32 pregnancies that they followed up on, 31 were death. They knew that. They knew a lot about that vaccine. And as we've seen in the Pfizer paper, they continued to push it. They didn't tell people. Truly, at this stage, with what we know, I'll call criminal negligence causing death and bodily harm. So will a lot of people. But back in December of 2021, it was questions. Detective Grus was also questioning the fact that the police service, Ottawa Police Service, was going to mandate the vaccine for all their personnel. You want to keep your job? You want to keep your mortgage? You want to keep paying your mortgage, put food on the table? You must be injected with this wonderful vaccine. So Detective Grus asked questions, and she sent out an email to the chief and a lot of other people. It was widely distributed. This is in, I think, November, October of 2021. And she asked questions like, are there any side effects? Is there any liability? If we get hurt taking this, are we covered for the rest of our lives by the police force? Normal things that one might ask. What's in it? What's in these injections? And for that, she was ostracized. She was shut down. She was sent to another office far away from the main office. She's a bad girl asking those questions. Don't forget, she was an award-winning detective, but now that you're asking the wrong questions, they didn't even invite her to the Christmas party. So
after 20 years, and I'm sure a lot of respect from many of the entire service, right?
Right, but you know how Canadians turned against each other? No different on the police service.
Yeah.
So they made her work on Christmas Eve. Get that. A 20-year veteran has to work on Christmas Eve. Now, I don't care if you're in a factory in Hamilton or you're in the school board or what you do for a living, you're a radio broadcaster. Seniority is home on Christmas Eve with their children. And all the new young guys and girls,
Yep.
you got to pay your dues, and that means working Christmas. But no, they made her work Christmas. You see? So
Was this a constructive dismissal type situation forming already, do you think?
well, she hasn't been dismissed yet, and I'll get to where she is now. But absolutely, they wanted her done because she was asking questions about their narrative. And that theme runs through this whole case. They needed to do two things with Detective Grus. Number one, stop her investigation, which they did. And number two, make an example of her so no other police officer in Canada would dare launch an investigation into what we all know should be investigated. So in January, she met with the chief a couple of times in December and January, and she informed the sergeant major of the police service that she was doing this investigation. And he gave testimony that it looked fine. Everything was fine. She was doing everything right. He was a defense witness. But on February 3rd, I think February 3rd or February 1st, Detective Grus was suspended for not taking the injections and for not saying whether she had taken the injections or not. She said, that's my medical records, my bodily autonomy. I'm not telling you. They suspended her without pay for that. On the day before I should mention that during the month of January, she looked into the files in the system for these suspicious infant deaths. Now, that's nothing. Everybody who's a police officer can look at any file, any investigation, unless there's a hold on it or something. But you can do that, and we do that so that police officers have the benefit of knowing what's happening in their community, of being able to connect cases. And just a few years prior, Detective Grus had looked into the records on her own initiative, and she found an historic child rape case, sexual assault. And she pursued that, and she arrested the perpetrator, saw it through, convicted him, and put him in jail. That was on her own initiative, looking into the police files. So this is normal. Unless you're looking into the police files for evidence that contradicts the narrative that we're safe and effective. And that's what happened. So she started looking into the files, and she discovered that most of the cases of this sudden infant death were not investigated correctly. Her own colleagues had not investigated, either through incompetence or laziness or whatever. There are certain questions that have to be asked. And look, I investigated infant deaths back in the 1980s when I was a detective back then. And one of the questions, a series of questions you would naturally ask the parents is, was the child vaccinated? What vaccines did they have? When did they have it? Have you been vaccinated? What medicines are in the home? You can just imagine, it's like a homicide investigation. You're dealing with grief-stricken parents, and this is just the way it is. And people understand that this must be done. But in this case, many of the parents had not been asked by the investigating officer about vaccines. And one of the prosecution witnesses testified that she didn't ask that question because it might have upset the parents. So in other words, there's been a homicide or an unexplained death, and we're not going to ask the parents about the vaccine status of the baby and them. Wow. We also learned from the Pfizer documents that the vaccine and the spikes go through mother's milk into the baby.
I was about to ask that. Was the case that these babies were, I know they were recommending that babies get vaccinated, but I'm not quite clear on my timelines, and I'm wondering if these spikes got through to the babies from their mothers or if they were vaccinated at birth.
The evidence that I heard, and I didn't hear all of it, indicated that this was a breastfeeding situation. Now, babies are vaccinated when they're born. There's all sorts of vaccines. Did any of them get the COVID vaccine? The answer is, I don't know. I didn't hear evidence about that. All medical evidence was disallowed by the adjudicator.
But that's the basis of the case.
Sorry, it's not relevant according to the judge. It's not a judge. His name is Chris Renwick. He's a retired police superintendent from Ottawa. Ottawa pays his bills. I can tell you right now, he didn't write this judgment. He did not write this judgment, this verdict. No way. He's had no legal training at all, which bears the question, who wrote the judgment?
I want to get to that at the end of the tale.
All right. So let's just keep, you know what? I could go forever, and we still we'd be here a week from now. So okay. I better speed it up. Okay.
Sure.
All right.
Hey, you're on time. Your timeline, Donald, not mine. I mean, I could go all night, but I know you got a busy day. So.
All right. So Detective Grus on January 30th. Phoned one of the parents, one of the fathers, who it wasn't asked, it wasn't answered on the form. The investigation was sloppy. It was not done. So she phoned the father up. She said, look, can you tell me, has the mother been vaccinated? And by all accounts and the evidence, the father was most happy to have a police officer call and ask him that question. It came out later in evidence during the trial that no other police officer called, not for months, and asked that question. So, it was either sloth.
Were these other officers? I mean, at this stage of the game, Helen has been ostracized, not invited to the Christmas party. Had she been demoted yet?
No, but her other fellow officers complained about her. They complained to professional standards. Yeah, and this is what started the investigation.
So what I'm thinking about here is the reason these parents weren't contacted by other officers could simply be that these officers did not want to pick up this investigation based on the fact that I don't want to get Helen Grus, right? I don't want to be treated like that. I've got a house to pay for.
No, the evidence didn't come out like that. The evidence very much came out that they thought they had done a good job, and they were I think they were embarrassed and insulted that Detective Grus would look at their work and discover that it wasn't very good. So they complained to the boss. This is jealousy. This is jealousy, and this is also she's already ostracized, and we've had enough. So they complained, an investigation was started. Meanwhile, she's suspended for not having the shot or refusing to say if she has the shot. Right. The day after she's suspended for that, she's suspended now with pay because she's under investigation for disobeying an order and discreditable conduct. Okay, disobeying an order and discreditable conduct. She's under investigation for that because somebody complained. So that's what happened. And then there was an investigation started. But on February 18th, 2022, the police service secretly and illegally wiretapped Detective Grus and her family. Okay? And that was done under the Emergency Anti-Terrorist provisions of the criminal code.
What?
You heard me.
They tried to classify her as a terrorist?
They did when they got that wiretap against her. How about that?
I'm
Now,
blown away by that.
They also did it knowing that they would have to notify her that between this date and that date, you were wiretapped. And wiretapping doesn't just mean listening in on your phone, okay? It means all your emails. It means your texts. They can turn on your phone while it's beside your bed. They can do everything they want. I worked wiretaps for years. And that was with the old technology. Now, oh my goodness. So she knows that her son's conversations with the girlfriends were overheard, that her husband's business, that maybe her mother said something and disclosed something to some friend. Who knows? Who knows? But they did that to her. And they did that to her because they knew they would have to notify her. So it became a punishment. It became an abusive factor. So here you go. And when she got that, you can imagine how she felt, knowing that her comrades had wiretapped her and worse, wiretapped her family. It was just terrorism against her, punishment.
What I'm trying to wrap my head around here is the fact that Helen was investigating properly as a police officer. She did nothing wrong. Yeah, no. This is what she's supposed to be doing. The police, in order to, I don't know, protect themselves somehow or their corruption, illegally wiretapped her, and Helen, and her family, and classified her as a terrorist to make that happen.
That's what they did. It was under the provision. Who knows what they told the judge? And I think other people are trying to find out. The lawyers are trying to find out, but that's what happened. And then came March. Now you understand, every investigation has a plan, especially an investigation that's internal, that's against another police officer. You don't just walk out the door and start doing things. There's a plan. And at the end of the plan, you would go to your last witnesses, the ones that you don't want to pollute. And that would have been the parents. So the plan, the investigative plan for whoever was the professional standards, and we know who it was, there would be a plan. First, they seized Detective Grus's computers, her phone. They searched her desk. They searched her locker. They even came to her home and delivered her a notice. So these are things that are done when you investigate police officers. And I have investigated police officers. I've executed search warrants against their home, and I've arrested them, unfortunately, even at their home, in front of their family. So I know how this is done. So in any event...
let me stop you there for a second. As a veteran police officer, when you're going to investigate another officer, it's got to be difficult, I understand, but you're going there based upon evidence, correct? And the evidence that you see in order to bring you to that situation has got to be very convincing, I'm assuming, before you can ever get to that stage. But
maybe not. I mean, every investigation starts with a question. Hey, it's 3 a.m. on a Sunday morning. Why is that barbershop open in the alley? People are going in and out the back alley. I mean, that's just a question. I've got no evidence there. All I see is people going in and out of a barbershop at 3 a.m. What are they doing?
Yeah, but when we're talking about an investigation where you're going and seizing property and arresting an officer at his home, the investigation has advanced to that stage of the game, right? So you've obviously picked up some pieces of evidence along the way that are pretty damning.
Well, first of all, what you do is you seize all the records. Everything that needs to be preserved, you would do that. And they did that, okay? And that's pretty standard. There's an allegation. So they just did that. They have the right. Now, they didn't arrest her. but they did suspend her. They took her badge, her gun, all the rest of that. Okay.
Yeah.
But it was because of what this is all about. I mean, you can be under investigation for something and they won't suspend you. They won't take your badge. They won't take your gun. But for this, they did. Okay. Because she's a troublemaker, asking questions, the wrong questions.
Dishonorable conduct and disobeying an order, leading to having all of her computers, phones, gun, badge, all of that taken away, seems a little bit excessive. And you would think the officers executing these orders would understand that.
Hey, they're the same guys who put the wiretap on, okay? So
Yeah,
don't
you're
talk
right.
about excessive.
No,
This-
it seems
was
so
the
corrupt to me. I'm sorry.
It is corrupt.
Yeah,
And the punishment is the process.
yeah.
But what they did by suspending her was they shut down her investigation. They shut down a police officer's investigation. She gave testimony later. She was looking into criminal negligence causing death and bodily harm. That's what she was doing because of the vaccines. So the investigation would have progressed. It would have taken several months, except for this. Some of her fellow officers who didn't like her decided that they'd phone up the CBC. They spoke to reporter Shamini Yogaretnam, and they illegally, criminally gave her inside secret information about the families, about the investigation of Detective Grus, and about what she was supposed to have done or alleged to have done. Disobeyed an order. Well, it turned out that there was no order prohibiting her from doing that, so that was dropped eventually, that charge. There was no order. But in any event, the CBC, Shamini Yogaretnam and the CBC, came to the Ottawa police after these two police officers criminally, and we don't know their names, I'll tell you about that later. We don't know who they were, but they came and they criminally gave this information to the CBC. This ongoing investigation, families, all that information. CBC came to the Ottawa police and said, "We know all about it. We're giving you 24 hours to contact the parents." Do they know about it? We'll give you 24 hours. So the CBC took operational control of the investigation. You understand? There was a plan, way things were going down. CBC came in and said, no. Have you told the parents yet? Well, you've got 24 hours.
Have you told the parents that Helen's under investigation?
Yeah. Have you told the parents that their privacy was violated? It wasn't.
No, because as you pointed out earlier, and it was, I think, brought out in the tribunal, that these parents were happy to talk to a police officer regarding what could possibly have happened to their child.
Two of the families testified in Detective Grus's defense.
Yeah.
Okay, so here we are. The CBC is running the operational investigation. So it hit the papers in the typical CBC style. It was all one-sided. They called Detective Grus rogue, said she was doing went rogue, did a rogue investigation. And it was all, this information was sourced from these nattering comrades of hers who disliked her. And
Criminals, Donald.
Criminals.
Criminals.
Oh, yes. Well, let me tell you, Detective Grus demanded of Professional Standards and the chief that Professional Standards launch an investigation to determine who those officers were that broke the law, that spread it all over the news so that the parents now did know, and if they were upset, they would have been upset, and one of them was. And Detective Grus demanded an investigation, and Professional Standards, they could have seized phones, they could have looked at phone records, they could have done all the rest of that. But they said no, and they did not do an investigation.
When you request an investigation from professional standards and they tell you no, do they have to provide a reason, or can they just say no? I'm sorry, that's what we're doing.
We're talking about rogue officers. We're talking about officers who failed in their duty to investigate infant deaths. So they just did what they want.
We're painting a pretty awful picture of the Ottawa Police Service here, Donald.
It is pretty awful. It is pretty awful. Absolutely.
And so, people want to have faith in their police officers. They want to be able to trust these folks to do the right thing. We understand, of course, they're human beings and everybody makes mistakes. But ultimately, we must hold police to a higher standard, and they must act on that higher standard. And when we hear stories like this, it really deflates. I mean, this is going to the entire notion that Canadians are feeling right now, that our institutions are broken, from municipal to provincial to federal. And it continues. They just keep doing it, which saddens me.
So my investigation showed that the personnel from the Public Health Agency of Canada interfered with and influenced the police investigation into Detective Helen Grus from March 2022.
Now, I know that Brett Sears has requested and finally gotten a lot of Theresa Tam's emails from the Public Health Agency of Canada, and I know that you found something in the first week that they were released regarding Inuit babies being vaccinated against their parents' will, or not even informed by any of this, with some experimental vaccine. So congratulations on that. That was great work that you did. Have you found anything regarding Helen Grus in any of these communications so far?
Not yet, but we're only 2019 in the Sears documents. So
and there's so many
we'll see what's coming.
Pages.
We'll see what's coming. Yeah, it was 450,000 pages is what they've promised him. He only has 1,818 so far that have been released.
That's insane. So you are you sure that there was influence from PHAC over the Ottawa police, or is this just speculation at this stage of the game as you continue to look for more evidence?
I spoke with both of them. I recorded the conversations. It's all on the web, on my website. It's very, very sad. Here's the situation. During one of Helen's Grus's court appearances, tribunal appearances, it was televised over the net. And I saw that a doctor from the Public Health Agency of Canada was monitoring the Detective Grus trial. I thought, that's very funny. So I phoned her up. She said she was doing it for a personal reason, even though it was on duty and it said Public Health Agency of Canada. So she did it on her account. And so I hung up, thanked her, told her what I was doing, thanked her. And then immediately I got a call from a lawyer. And it turns out that the lawyer who called me is a mother to one of the dead babies. And it turns out that she was fully vaccinated and breastfed her baby. And her mother, the grandmother that I spoke to, the Public Health Agency of Canada employee, is one of those who are on the team of mandating the vaccines. What a tragedy. So we have a situation where the grandmother was one of those working to mandate the vaccine and approve it. And the daughter took it and breastfed her baby, and the baby died. And to this day, there's no explanation. So they started interfering with the investigation in March when the CBC article started appearing. So I mean, it's just a tragic story all the way around.
How long did this tribunal last?
2.5 years.
Off and on for 2.5 years.
Right, but a total of, I think, 35, 38 days. Unbelievable.
Which
I've
is
seen I've seen homicide trials, go 7 days. I mean, this thing went over a month of appearances.
So as you say, the penalty is, or the punishment is the process.
Detective Grus has paid, I understand, over $400,000 in legal fees. Her union refused to pay her legal fees, even though they have paid the legal fees for cops who have been charged on duty with rape and taking bribes. But the union also was for the mandating of the injections, and there might be some liability there.
Now, is Helen, am I correct in assuming that Helen is suing the CBC right now and Ottawa police for what those two police officers did in terms of releasing the information the way they did?
I'm not sure about the Ottawa police. I believe there is a lawsuit going right now for CBC. There's so much more to tell about this story, so much more. The whole trial was a sham. It was just an absolute sham, a kangaroo court. The superintendent, Chris Renwick, who was the adjudicator, the hearing officer, whatever you want to call him, of the tribunal, has no legal training.
Right.
And the courts have held that whatever tribunals do, they can pretty well do it. They can make up their own rules. So he refused to allow Detective Grus 5 expert defense witnesses, 3 of whom were doctors, whose testimony was, thank God she did what she did, and that that it was necessary. And another expert witness was a lawyer, Sean Buckley. You might know him.
Mm-hmm.
About the law in regards to all this. And then another expert witness was the staff sergeant, the Ottawa Police Sergeant Major, who was in charge of ethics. And his testimony was that, as an expert, would have been, she did everything ethically correctly and broke no laws. They disallowed all that. They wouldn't allow her to see her January 30th, 2022 memo book that she wrote. They wouldn't allow her to see it.
Yeah.
Do
they still have her computers and her phones and all of that? Is it still?
They suspended her in February of 2022. And I have some pretty good sources. In August, I heard that they were going to reinstate her in active duty, transfer her to another squad. And so, yes, I think in October and November of 2022, still facing the charge, but she's just a darn good detective. So she's now at robbery, and she's been working there since the fall of 2022 at robbery. And that's a top-notch squad. Only the best get in there. And there she is, because she's just a great detective. So anyway,
is she still being ostracized and treated poorly, or is that all water under the bridge now?
Well, she's not allowed to have anything to do, under the terms of some agreement with her lawyer, not allowed to have anything to do with any sexual assault cases or anything to do with her old squad, SACA. So she's now working and doing fine. But the trial continued, and it was just full of bias. The prosecutor at the time, there have been 3 prosecutors. Vanessa Stewart was the middle prosecutor, we'll call her. She was taken off the case last December. I understand that she was dismissed or asked to leave, or however you want to put it, from the Ottawa Police Legal Department. Anyway, she was the prosecutor on the case, but her sister-in-law was one of the prosecution witnesses. Now, if you know anything about court, this just is not allowed. But the tribunal allowed it. The tribunal officer allowed it. Then we had a situation where in January of 2024, during the hearing, the head of professional standards, Inspector O'Toole, criminally threatened Detective Grus, sent an email, what an idiot, sent an email to her saying that if she testified, she was going to be in big trouble if she brought in these exhibits, Exhibit 1, Exhibit 2, whatever. Well, you know, there's a section in the criminal code called intimidation of a witness, threatening a witness. The sense of entitlement, the lawlessness, the spitting on the rule of law of this man. So what happened? Well, there was a big kerfuffle in court. Detective Grus's legal team walked out to make a criminal complaint at the front desk of the police station where the tribunal was being held. There was yelling and screaming by the prosecutor. It was absolute insanity. And
Kangaroo court. You're
Inspector O'Toole resigned. My inside information is he was given a choice: resign or resign. And he's now a lawyer practicing near Canada, Ontario. I mean,
how I mean,
you can't make this stuff up, you know.
When it comes to laying a charge, I mean, have the police laid a charge against him?
Oh gosh, no. They wouldn't
No, they
do
just
that.
they just
They wouldn't
dismissed
do
him.
that.
Of
Come
course
on,
not.
he did a criminal offense in writing. He threatened a witness in writing, and no, he was just allowed to resign.
My God. So she's found guilty this morning. I'm sorry, was there more? Because I know that your time is growing short here, my friend.
Oh, all right. We better get, look, I could go on all day about the kangaroo court and the nature of this, about witnesses getting caught lying on the stand, lying, about no disclosure. That Detective Grus has been, and her legal team have been fighting this with one hand tied behind their back because of no disclosure. Over $400,000 in legal fees. The punishment is the process, right? They're going to bankrupt her. They're going to destroy her. And this is what they want. They want it as a lesson to her, and they want it as a lesson to all the police officers in Canada. Big Pharma is going to get you.
Yeah.
And that's what this is all about. So we have the so-called decision. And it's available on the Ottawa Police website. You can get to it through my X account and several others. It's right at the top right now, and you can download it yourself. It's 34 pages, and once again, I can tell you that the hearing officer, Chris Renwick, there's no way he wrote this. No way. I know who wrote it. The Ottawa Police prosecuting team.
The ones who were prosecuting Detective Grus in the first place. They wrote this.
Now that's a guess on my part.
Yeah.
But I don't think I'm too far wrong. And I wonder, does Mr. Renwick have a budget to hire independent legal counsel? Because if he doesn't, and he can't show who he had to advise him on this thing, there is absolutely no way he wrote this. And that's true of a lot of the decisions that came out during the trial that he reportedly wrote. There's no way he wrote these things.
So what's the remedy? I mean, if he didn't write this decision, and let's say the Ottawa Police prosecution team did, as you suggest, then what can Helen do aside from an appeal? And I imagine the next step is for Helen to go to actual court, or is there another kangaroo court yet to come?
Well, here we go. Right in the middle of all this, they changed the Ontario Police Services Act. and they changed it to they call it something else now, the Ontario Community Safety and Policing Act, and that came into force on April 1st, 2024. Now there's a transition period, and there's some transition legislation in there, some rules and some regulations. And I read it this morning, and I have no idea where Detective Grus has to appeal. If it's under the old way, she has to appeal to the Ontario Civilian Police Commission. And only then, after that, can she get to a real court.
What's the Ontario Civilian Police Commission? What's that?
Okay, well, it's
isn't that kind of an oxymoron? The civilian police?
It's a tribunal put in place to handle the police tribunals as an appeal mechanism. Okay, I mean, if you're charged and you want to appeal, this is going to cost you. So if it's the old way, then she'll have to, during this transition period, because her charge was laid before the new Police Act was put in place, then she'll have to go there before she can go to divisional court. Now, I'm no lawyer. As a matter of fact, I'm really lousy legal counsel, okay? So don't believe anything I say. Don't act on it. But it looks to me like if it's under the new system, she would go directly to divisional court. But either way, she's got 30 days to file an appeal, and that clock is running right now. There's lots to appeal, I mean, Bathsheba, look, if I needed a lawyer to defend me for anything, Bathsheba Vandenberg, I'd be honored to have her defend me. She's so knowledgeable. She doesn't back down. And I mean, it got to the point where she just said, all right, let's just move on with this. That's appealable, sir. Mr. And the list, I don't know, it must be 20, 30, 40 items right now. This whole thing with
appeal them all. This could go on for the rest of our lives. For goodness sakes. I mean,
but the real reason, and let me get to the heart of the thing.
Yes.
The heart of the thing is that in this decision, we have the tribunal officer repeating something that was said by the prosecutor during the closing arguments. And it was this, that that police officers should get permission to investigate public officials and politicians before initiating an investigation.
So again, we go permission from who? Their immediate supervisor? Or do they have to go right up the chain? Is it something that could take weeks to get permission to investigate, in which case the evidence that you were looking at might be long gone? I mean, what
permission.
Yeah.
And this is what they said because it was, I forget the exact words, but it was like politically sensitive. Really?
But it should have nothing to do with politics. That's...
Oh, you want rule of law, sir, where everybody's treated equally. Rule of law is long dead in this country, and you know that, Shadow.
Yes,
rule of law is long dead in this country.
It's...
Now, one thing that, this destroys 150 years of policing law, independence. We made police officers not unaccountable. By no means. There's all sorts of accountability structures in place. But we gave our police officers great autonomy to act as they see fit according to their oath, according to the laws they understand it, and their rules and regulations. And we do that because everybody wants to control the police. When I was a copper, we had politicians coming to the chief saying, leave that bar alone. Don't raid that ship. Can you do a favor? I know the guy's been arrested 3 times for drunk driving, but he's a good guy and he contributes to the Widows and Orphans Funds. And you have to stand up when you're a police officer, and you have to have integrity and you have to have courage to stand there, as my squad leader did. And I told about this when I testified at the National Citizens Inquiry. Staff Sergeant Harry Darcy, he stood up to the chief who wanted him to leave an investigation, to not investigate a certain cruise ship in the harbor that was owned by an NDP member of provincial parliament, MLA. And Harry told the chief of police, look, sir, you can transfer me, you can fire me, but the one thing you can't do is order me to not continue my criminal investigation. But
So
now
this
that's all
is-
changed.
Yeah, this is corruption versus integrity.
And let me tell you that it's now been codified. What happened in the Detective Grus case, where she stepped on political toes, and we now have in a judgment, I mean, there's not a more damning, corrupt document that I've seen in a long time than this judgment. I want everybody to go and read it themselves, download it and read it themselves. It basically says that unauthorized criminal negligence inquiries on public officials were being undertaken by a criminal investigator, Detective Grus. Unauthorized. She should have asked for permission.
What public officials was she investigating? She was investigating the death of babies. Where did the public officials come into it?
Well, how about the ones that approved the vaccine?
Yeah.
How about the ones that knew that babies had died and had been injured breastfeeding during the trials? How
They
about
knew.
those public officials?
They knew. They knew.
How about the doctors who knew all that, but were getting $50 a shot for everything they pumped into, and they held clinics, mass clinics on the street in Ottawa, and vaccinated 1,000 people in a weekend, $50 a shot? How about that?
$250 if you held it in a parking lot. If you
Sure.
went off site, it was more. Wow.
And there you go.
They knew from the top down. Donald, you know what? I know it's an hour, dude. You,
Let me tell okay, let me give you the last bit here,
Okay.
because this is the most shocking of all. What was done to Detective Grus was done in a legal environment where there was absolutely no law and no requirement and no order requiring any police officer to get permission for any investigation. And that's the way we set it up. But on April 1st, 2024, Ontario published Ontario Regulation 395/23, made under the Ontario Community Safety and Policing Act. And it now requires police, listen to this, to obtain permission before launching any criminal investigation. Now, if they come across something, they can of course arrest, do whatever, but at the first available opportunity, you have to notify a supervisor. You must give permission to keep it going. That's codified now. And what it means is we have operational control of individual police officers, their discretion taken away from them. And it means that we've put a political layer on policing. No longer can a police officer drive down the street and say, hey, some 3 a.m. that barbershop's open. Park his car, get out a pair of binoculars, and see people going in and out with drugs or stolen goods or whatever. Now they have to get permission. And maybe that barbershop is owned by the inspector's brother. Who knows? You see the problems here? When you take the initiative away and you don't allow police officers to fulfill their duty. This is a huge change in Canadian policing in 150 years, and it's layer after layer of corruption and political interference with the police.
What do you think will be the results of this new directive?
Corruption.
More corruption.
It always is. That's the way it is in India and throughout much of Asia. And Mexico. Oh my goodness! I've worked in Mexico. I've worked in Central America and throughout the States and in Asia, and such corruption. You just wouldn't believe it, that a police officer, before he could arrest an important person in town, must seek permission to do that before he can even investigate. He might be told no, or she might be told no.
What's your X handle, Donald?
Say again?
What's your X handle?
Donald Best CA.
That's the website. What about X?
X is Donald Best CA. The website is donaldbest.ca. There you go.
Thank you for coming on the show tonight, my friend. Really appreciate it. Have a great day.
Well, thanks. It's an honor. And this should be an issue during this federal election. This is such a massive change in the way we do policing and such incredible corruption in the Detective Helen Grus story that truly I wish people would ask the candidates about this story, become familiar with it, and ask them. We have to do something.
We should do a part 2 at some point in the next week or so if you have some free time. I'd love to have you back on to fill up the holes because we did have to rush a little bit today.
Well, that'd be great. And thank you so much for telling the Detective Grus story and the fact that it is the most important story in Canadian policing in 150 years.
Thank you, sir. Have a great day. We'll talk to you again. Welcome back. We have some news we have to cover. There is an election campaign going on. And one more time, I would like to thank Donald Best, anti-corruption advocate, former Toronto undercover police officer, for coming on the show tonight. And hopefully we can get him back at some point in the next week to fill in the gaps and talk more about this particular situation and other situations that he's been involved in and is possibly working on. So this story, let me just throw this up on the screen here, was hilarious. And the reason for the hilarity of this story is Mark Carney trying to smear Pierre Poilievre. Mark Carney, not being a politician, doesn't do it right. He does it wrong. He was being asked questions this morning about Poilievre not having his security clearance. Somehow that's making a comeback. And then Carney made remarks regarding the Globe and Mail smear campaign regarding Indian interference into the Conservative Party of Canada's leadership contest a couple of years ago. Now, let's remember that this story they've had for 2 years. For 2 years. And only today did the Globe and Mail decide to put it out. Now, I'm going to throw this up, you guys, and then I'm going to explain why. And some of you may or may not trust the Globe and Mail, but you shouldn't, because I'm going to explain it in just a second. From the National Post, from Carson Jarima, the Globe's India story smears Poilievre with Carney talking points. So it's not based in any fact. It's based upon what Mark Carney said. Well, there goes the Globe and Mail, one of the few outlets in the country that hadn't been entirely captured by the Liberals, gifted them with a smear of Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre this morning. The story headlined, CSIS alleges India organized support for Poilievre's 2022 Conservative leadership bid contains almost no new information. At best, 100 new words out of 1,100. Delivered on the third day of the election campaign and laced with Liberal talking points about Poilievre's security clearance. Nothing about it smells right. The Globe sourced its story not to someone within CSIS, but merely to a source with top secret clearance. That means it could have been someone from CSIS, but but it could have also been a member of the cross-party National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians, or it could have been a member of the Prime Minister's office, or it could have been a cabinet minister with the requisite clearance, or even the Prime Minister. It reads like a planted story released for maximum political benefit for Mark Carney's Liberals. Now, this is very interesting because Pierre Poilievre held a press conference this morning where he was talking about further tax cuts and more removal of the GST on homes now up to $1.3 million. But this was the first question that Poilievre was asked this morning after making his new campaign promises, and he was ready for it. Watch this.
On that.
Well, first of all, let's quote from that Globe and Mail article. I'm going to quote here. CSIS also did not have evidence that Mr. Poilievre or members of his inner circle were aware of these alleged actions. Then I'm going to quote the Hogue Commission, and I quote, "The Commission heard testimony about allegations of the government India interference in the Conservative Party leadership race. CSIS witnesses noted that they had no reason to believe the impacted candidates would have been aware of the alleged support." Let's be honest. I won the leadership fair and square. Even my political competitors, like Mr. Patrick Brown, have publicly testified under oath that that was the case. But I'm glad that the Liberals put this attack out today. Really glad. Because there's something that's really been worrying me. After Justin Trudeau named Mark Carney his economic advisor, giving him massive power over public policy in Canada, Mr. Carney went over for meetings in Beijing where he just had secret talks with the deputy governor of the Chinese central bank. 2 weeks later, Brookfield got a $250 million loan. What did they talk about? What did Mr. Carney in his role as Trudeau's economic advisor offer of China? Why would he be having secret meetings with top government-controlled bankers about getting a $250 million loan while he was supposed to be acting in Canada's interest as the Prime Minister's economic advisor? Why would he be collaborating with a hostile foreign regime that we have since learned executed 4 Canadians and took numerous Canadians hostage for a lengthy period of time? And given that Mr. Carney knows that he still owns massive financial interests in Brookfield, which owes a $250 million to a Chinese state-controlled bank, how do we know he's not going to act against our interests in favor of his financial interests? Why didn't he stand in front of this microphone and confess to Canadians that he owes the Chinese government that kind of money? Is this why he's covering up his financial interests? And given that China has murdered our people, taken our people hostage, how is he ever going to stand up to foreign interference when he is so financially compromised? We have never in our history had a weak, out-of-touch leader so terribly compromised and conflicted, whose interests go against our national interests. And I call on Mr. Carney right now to come before a microphone today and explain if this loan is still in place and if he still has those Brookfield assets that he had up until a few weeks ago. Because we cannot trust someone. Could you imagine, while you're supposed to be advising Canada's Prime Minister on the well-being of our economy, going to a foreign regime that had executed Canadian citizens, taken Canadians hostage, that it had already been public that they had interfered in multiple elections? They've done incursions into our northern waters. Mark Carney will never be able to protect our national interests because he has massive financial conflicts of interest overseas. What we need now is not to give the Liberals a 4th term with a weak and compromised leader. What we need is a Prime Minister who will put Canada first for a change.
All right. So let me show you something here. I think I showed you guys this before, but I'm going to show you again. We go to the Bureau The Bureau.News, that's Sam Cooper's thing. And he does such incredible reporting on all of this foreign interference that's been happening in Canada. It goes back years. The headline on this particular story, which from a couple of weeks ago, Brookfield's deep ties to Chinese lands, loans, and green deals, and a real estate tycoon with CCP links raise questions as Carney takes over from Trudeau. This photo right here is from May of last year, before Mark Carney was essentially anything. Well, no, that's not true. He was the CEO of Brookfield at the time. He was also the UN Special Climate Envoy. And what else was he? Oh, yeah, he was the financial advisor for Justin Trudeau and the Liberals. And here is Mark Carney standing with all of these people here in China just last May, including Xi Jinping right here. He wasn't the prime minister, Carney. He was nothing. Like I say, he had no standing, really, to be meeting with these people. Unless, of course, Poilievre is right, and Brookfield does owe China $250 million, or maybe it's more. Why won't Mark Carney disclose his financials? Well, they're in a blind trust now. I can't get my hands on them. That doesn't matter. You knew what they were before they went into the blind trust. Why don't you tell us what they are? How much are you worth? Where does your wealth come from, Mr. Carney? Well, I'm following the rules as set out by the commissioner, and I will continue to follow the rules as set out by the commissioner. All right, so maybe you're following the rules technically speaking, but visually, this really sucks. This guy could be is, in my opinion, compromised by China, the World Economic Forum, and he is a step away from being the prime minister of this country. How on earth could this happen? And why won't this close? Oh, because it's over here. In the meantime, I just closed out a couple of stories that I wanted. Hey, listen, if you're in the Winnipeg area and you want to go to a Canada First rally with Pierre Poilievre Saturday, this coming Saturday at 1821 Wellington Avenue. What is that? Is that a hotel by the airport? Doors open at 3 o'clock. So this coming Saturday afternoon at 3 o'clock, 1821 Wellington Avenue. Yeah, it's a hotel by the airport. Hang on, you guys. Let me see if I can find the stories. Let me see if I can find the stories that I wanted to bring to your attention. They come from Andy Lee. And Andy points out the ties between the Century Initiative and the Globe and Mail. So remember that National Post story that said the Globe and Mail was one of the only corporate medias that wasn't captured by the Liberal Party, and now they are? Well, hang on, where is this? There it is. The problem is that this guy sends me so much stuff that I'll never be able to find it. Oh my God. This goes back. All right. So anyway, the bottom line is the Century Initiative and this Mark Wiseman character who Mark Carney has just hired to be one of his special advisors. He's also one of the board members of the Century Initiative, and the Century Initiative is a corporate sponsor of the Globe and Mail newspaper. So put those two things together. All of a sudden now, Globe and Mail's doing hit pieces on the Conservative Party of Canada. Wow, what a shocker. Here's Michelle Ferrari. This is a great video of Michelle coming up with a question for people who are not really interested in voting or thinking about voting for the Liberals. The question is, well, I'll let her tell you what it is.
Just come down to 161 King Street to grab a sign. Thank you. And your question is a very good one. So he says, you know, I have friends that I'm trying to have conversations with about liberals, and they don't support the Conservatives, and they have questions about what Conservatives stand for, and that they voted against things like pharmacare or dental care or child care, and this is the propaganda that they're moving online. The first question I would say to you, Wayne, to ask your Liberal friends is this. Tell me what in the last 10 years has gotten better.
Exactly.
Just tell me one thing.
I can't think of anything.
Okay. Second thing I would say to you is, what happens when you change the singer of the band? Does the band change?
Nope.
Absolutely not. So you're not getting anything new, folks. As for this propaganda that's circulating around, you are absolutely right. So what we voted against are non-confidence votes or budget or estimates votes. Today, Pierre Poilievre did an announcement that he will be cutting the GST on new homes valued $1.3 million. In that press conference, he went on to say that a question came from one of the media saying, but what are you going to do with pharmacare, dental care, and child care? We will ensure that these programs stay with the people who are offering them, but we will fix them because they are a disaster. They are not fair. They are not equitable. So every time somebody says we voted against these things, what we voted against were exactly what you thought, Wayne.
Yep.
Confidence votes,
Yep.
budget votes that are embedded within that. But what we voted against every single time, and we will stand for this, is overspending and driving our economy into the ground and taxing people into poverty. $1 trillion worth of debt. That's what's been accumulated in this country. We are spending more on servicing the debt in this country because of Liberal NDP spending than we are in healthcare transfers. How's your healthcare, Wayne? Good?
No, it isn't, because
right.
you got to wait too long to get to see a doctor.
That's right.
Like 3 weeks to see just the doctor.
That's right.
And not even getting to the specialist.
That's right. That's right. So why would you keep doing the same thing and expecting different results, Wayne?
I have no idea. Boggles my mind.
It's time to put Canada first for a change.
Absolutely.
And why are you voting Conservative?
Because I believe in Mr. Poilievre and I believe in Michelle. She's done nothing but work hard for this community and the country, and that's important.
Thank you, Wayne. I love your support. You want a lawn sign? Come on down here. We're also having a campaign opening, and we'd love to see you. We need all the support we can get. This election is important.
It
Very
absolutely
important.
is.
Thanks, Wayne. I appreciate you.
Well, thank you, Michelle. It's great meeting you again.
Thanks, my friend.
Okay.
Yeah, she's
I'm
one
gonna
of
show
my
you
faves.
where my
I like
sources
her. Oh,
are.
whoa, 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 whoa. There's a ghost in the machine tonight, you guys. I'm sorry, but there just is. So it's all over the place. I found this guy on X today. Now, this is the source that Mario for the North and all of these TikTokers have been using to talk about Mark Carney and some of the stories that have been coming out about Mark Carney and Epstein Maxwell and his association with, Epstein, all of that. And this Twitter account, you see, there's all kinds, X account. There's all kinds of things that are now coming up from these mysterious accounts that never existed before, but somehow mysteriously in the course of 3 or 4 days have got 100,000 followers. I find it very odd. It's happening on all sides. It's not just conservatives. It's liberals and NDP and whatnot. But there are certain things. I believe even Ezra Levant might be behind one of these. It's third party. In the United States, they call them super PACs. But in Canada, it's third party, meaning you're not necessarily associated with the party you're advocating for technically. It's weird. There's all kinds of loopholes in the laws through Elections Canada and whatnot. But you may notice these, and of course the liberals are going to call it Russian disinformation, but you may notice more and more of these things on both sides popping up on all of your social media feeds in the next week or so. Vote Canada. Let's take a deep dive into Mark Carney's connections to the Epstein network and uncover every troubling detail. To begin, there's the damning photo from August 10th of 2013 at the Wildness Festival in Oxfordshire, England. At the time, Carney was the new governor of the Bank of England. He was photographed with Ghislaine Maxwell, who would later be convicted for trafficking minors to Jeffrey Epstein and his associates. This wasn't a random encounter. It was an intimate social moment at Cornbury Park, a sprawling estate owned by Carney's sister-in-law, Lady Tanya Rotherwick. Maxwell wasn't just a guest. She was a regular at this elite event. She'd even had a guest house on the property. Carney's wife, Diana Fox Carney, was there too. And the images show them socializing with Maxwell, looking comfortable and at ease. At the time, Maxwell's criminal activities were still unknown, but Epstein had already served a brief sentence in 2008 for soliciting prostitution from a minor. Carney's close proximity to Maxwell raises serious questions about his judgment and the company he kept. All right, let's take that off the screen. And now let's go to this raw and unfiltered guy. Now, guys, I'm going to tell you right now that there is a source that this guy uses that I'm not necessarily convinced about. You've heard me talk about this before. It's called the Wayback Machine. So I did some research on the Wayback Machine today through various search engines and could find nothing particularly odd about its creation or anything that's happened to it in the last 20 years. We know, obviously, things like Wikipedia have been compromised by one of the alphabet agencies, probably the CIA, but could be another one, we don't know. And many of the other social media networks who have been touched by some secret spy agency from somewhere. So is the Wayback Machine legitimate? I don't know. Oh, and by the way, this is the extension tonight. We are staying live on all socials until the end of the show tonight. I did have a whole other thing planned, but we're going long here tonight. So this is the extension for the Shadow at Night live stream tonight. So let's check out what Raw and Unfiltered Guy has to say. And again, you can follow him on X. Here we go.
Apparently, all the slides that I showed and all the connections and the name in the black book was just not good enough. So this is a website. It's called the Internet Archive. Y'all may know it as the Wayback Machine, but it does so much more than just look at websites. In this case, I used it to look up the little contact book of Epstein. And this is the unredacted version, as you can see here. Now, like I said, this isn't just for searching old websites. And I think a lot of people have been to this website to use the Wayback Machine, but never knew the amount of other things it can do. All you have to do is push on the little logo at the top there. You see the little White House looking thing and it says Internet Archive? Click that and it brings you to this main menu with a search bar. So now you know how I got these documents that are unredacted. Now let's go to where we got the redacted one. Now the difference between the two of them is one, you can't see personal information. The other one you can, like phone numbers, addresses, work. So this is the United States of America government website. This is where they're releasing the documents. Scroll down and you'll see the contact book. Click on it. Download it and you'll get this. The exact same thing as this, only redacted. So focusing on Rotherick and Diane right here in the bottom right, this is one version. This is the one on the state's government website. The reason why they're thick black squares is because they just covered all the information and left just the names. But see, Diane was beside phone numbers. She wasn't a title name at the top, like Rotherick, which is her sister. So they blocked it like they did for the addresses and phone numbers because it was at the bottom. It wasn't a main name. Now, the images everybody says is fake. This is Shutterstock, okay? They take real photos and then they sell them. Under that photographer is a bunch of Mark Carney and Diane's photos. It was just so happened they caught Maxwell in a few of the pictures. Now, you can purchase these photos. You can get all 25 for $2,400, or you can buy individual pictures for $200 a piece. So yes, the photos, the name, it's all real. Nothing is fake. Tanya and Robin, well, Tanya is Diane's sister, Mark Carney's sister-in-law. Now, why are these names in the book? Nobody knows. But that is Jeffrey Epstein's contact book. And if you're in that book, you have met the individual. So when Mark Carney is playing it off like he has no relationship, never met her, never met Jeffrey Epstein, that is an outright lie. And this confirms it because his wife's number is in the book. His sister-in-law's number is in the book. His ex-brother-in-law's number is in the book. The Wilderness Party where he went to, Cornbury Park, is in the book. So it's not just a photo and a far reach to try and link them together. This is a direct link. So although I've been sitting on this information for quite a time, like I'm saying years, I never thought to look for this name because I didn't care about Mark Carney then. He wasn't running for prime minister of my country. But now that he is, and people asked me to do some research, I dug deep. And then somebody reached out to me and said, guess whose name is in the book? I said, no way. So this is why I made the update video, because this 100% connects the Carneys to Maxwell and Epstein. Now I get it. A lot of people are going to be angry. You're going to say fake news. You're going to do whatever the government has weaponized you with these fancy little words of yours to attack people. But listen, when we laid out receipt for receipt for receipt, showing you step by step, showing you the sources, the credible sources, where to go and see it yourself, that is not fake news. That is real facts. Now, just because it doesn't suit your fairy tale of loving someone, voting for someone, supporting someone, and then finding out that they hang out with people like this, that would be heartbreaking. But you shouldn't be mad at me. You should be mad at the person who was not transparent to you and lying to the media, lying to the public just to get into office. And as I said in the last video, I couldn't make out this card. I put it through a few programs and it cleared it right up. And it does say wilderness. Bottom there it says AAA escort. And then as you can see, they got a green and orange band. And Mark Carney and his wife only has the green band. So that means Maxwell was working the concert, the potstock, the event for her friend, Tanya. And the escort probably means that she was escorting the singers or the artists from stage to wherever, whatever it is. She was involved in that. Therefore, she was a little bit more than just someone who was visiting the concert. So hopefully that cleared it up. I've done enough videos on this. If you guys don't want to believe it, carry on, go somewhere else. But I know what I know. I'm going to stick to it.
At additives_CA, if you want to follow him on X. And he's dropped a whole bunch of crazy stuff. The only thing is there's a lot of Wayback Machine in it. And I'm still investigating that because I'm just not convinced about that particular tool. It just seems too convenient. Okay, so I put out a post today, and you guys may have seen this. Maxime Bernier's team reached out to me in the last couple of days saying, hey, Max would be interested in being on your show, and I'm just trying to figure out why I would do that. He's been on the show 2 or 3 times in the past, and he has never come up with anything new. It's always the same old, same old, same old. I've been hearing a lot of stuff about Max in the last couple of weeks that make me believe that he doesn't want the PPC to win any seats. He doesn't want the PPC to be successful. He doesn't want the PPC to be a real political party. To what end? I don't know. Is it money-making? Maybe. Is it a vendetta against the CPC that he just runs the PPC to try and get back somehow at the Conservative Party of Canada because of what they did to him a few years ago? I don't know. Does he really believe in the things he says? Maybe. There's a guy called Frank Vaughan who was actually at the involved at the very beginnings of the People's Party of Canada, who's since left that party, and he has all kinds of great information on Maxime Bernier. So a lot of people have been asking me to reach out to Frank, get him on the show, and have that conversation, and I would love to do that. So I went back and I watched a couple of Frank's videos, and he's remarkably good. He delivers information in a very powerful, concise way, and I like his style. And I would love to have Frank Vaughan on. So if you guys, any of you guys know Frank, please reach out to him. or find a number for me or an email address or some sort of social media messaging thing that I can get a hold of him, I'd love to set up a night for Frank Vaughn to come on this show. There's a guy called David Shane with an organization called Awake Canada. Now, I didn't really have a lot of time for David Shane because of his involvement with that idiot a couple of years ago, Marcus Ray, I think. He was a big fan of Marcus Ray and what Marcus Ray was going to do. And I thought, oh, man, how can you be taken in by such a snake oil salesman like this? But to his credit, David is big enough, and I hope we all are, to admit when we make mistakes. So David dropped a video today regarding Maxime Bernier. And I want you to listen to this because it makes a hell of a lot of sense.
This is a personal message to Maxime Bernier of the PPC party. Do you remember back in the last election when he came out to Maple Ridge to meet members of the Awake Canada team? And we went back to, a friend's house and we sat, we had coffee, we chatted, I interviewed you. Do you remember that? Because I remember you asking me for my phone number, and I gave you my phone number, and then I never heard from you again. I seen you come down, poach support from Awake Canada people, go and fail miserably in an election, not winning a seat, and then coming back after the election and saying, hey, we did pretty good. We start from nowhere and now we're here. So the people that I got behind you at that time, I got behind you because I didn't trust the polls. I didn't trust what I was seeing and thought that maybe there was some chance you could get some kind of power in and some seats in there. So here's my question to you, Max. You've been at this now for 2 elections. You haven't won a seat. Canada's future is at massive stake here. I hear you talk more badly about Pierre than I do about Carney, even though Pierre has adopted 80% of your principles. I've heard you flat out lie about some of these policies. And I don't know if that's deliberate or if you're just ignorant, but I have to ask you this, Max. If you truly are the patriot that you say you are, you truly want to save this country like you say you do, wouldn't the right thing to do be the same as what RFK did when he threw in his hat and he threw his support behind Trump and gave Trump that win? If he indeed did play a factor into that. We certainly know it didn't hurt. We do know that he was polling at similar kind of numbers you were. He actually even had some strong demographics, 30% in some demographics, certain age groups and stuff like that. You have never polled better than 5%. You're currently polling at 2.5%. Every single vote that goes your way could have been a vote that might have given the Conservative government a majority government. Because you're a politician, you know that if the Conservatives don't get a majority, you do know that the Liberals, the NDP, the Green, and the Bloc are all going to make an alignment against the Conservatives so they can't pass any bills whatsoever. So the last I heard that you've got around 800,000 followers. If you were a patriot, Max, would you not at this time say, hey, listen, I know I can't win this election. I know I can't win a seat. Or maybe I can win a seat. I don't know. Maybe you don't know that. I don't think you can. But wouldn't this be the time to tell your voters, in the best interest of this country, since Pierre has adopted 80% of my policies, he wants to open up the pipelines. Remember that discussion we had? You said we didn't need to do anything. We didn't need to change any laws. We didn't need to reform anything. We just needed to follow the law. You told me about, I can't remember what it was, C-69, something like that, about the Anti-Pipelines Bill Act. And that you would just implement that as a prime minister. You would just go boom and you would change that in a heartbeat. Well, Pierre, that's on his platform. That's one of his major platforms. He's already talked to all the premiers. Everybody wants to open their energy up. But if the Liberals win for any reason, none of that happens. Okay? Pierre has also said he would ban vaccine mandates and mask mandates. He wants to kill woke ideology. Basically, Max, he's adapted just about everything that you've been fighting for. And you're sitting here trying to squeeze people for what? A seat? A seat? The people on this page, Max, that are following you are looking for you as a leader because you're a true voice for the conservative vote. But yet you cannot give them a single thing that you're promising to give them because you can't win a seat. Wouldn't it be better to give them like 80% of what you've promised that is now part of the conservative platform? Wouldn't it be better to make sure the Liberals like 100% don't get into power again? Because I got to believe this, Max. If you don't do this before the next election, here's what I predict for you. You're finished in politics. You're finished because you sold your country out. You have a chance to save this country. You have a chance to do it this election. You have a chance to give the Conservatives a majority government. If you choose not to do that, we will all see your true colors. The ball's in your court, Max. You either fuck Canada or you help us save it.
I tell you, man, with that, he is absolutely bang on. If it comes down to 2% here, 2% there. And you know how it is on election night when you're watching the television coverage and you see the votes coming in from all the different ridings across the country. And if you see a conservative that's behind a liberal by like 300 votes or less, 200 votes, and then you look at the very bottom of that particular riding's vote totals and you see a PPC that's got 500 votes, the PPC took that seat away from the Conservatives. And what could have been a Conservative majority government winds up being a minority government that gets taken down with a confidence vote in the first month, or maybe they lose the election altogether. Because who knows what the hell's going on right now. What I can tell you is that my gut does not go with all of the polls that we've been seeing. I'm trying to use my discernment, and I always, always, always trust my gut. The only time I don't trust my gut, that's when I'm wrong. No, man, don't trust your gut. Go right, not left. Wrong. Should have gone left. That's what my gut was telling me. My gut tells me that these polls are controlled by Chinese entities and that nothing has changed since last December or even early January before Trudeau quit. There is no way that Mark Carney is getting 45% support from Canadians. There just is no way. It's impossible. This guy, never mind what we know he is, and we're digging out more stuff every single day, but he's wallpaper. He's furniture. He can't put a sentence together. He makes no sense when he speaks. Now, he might be smart. He might be hardworking. He might have been the governor of the Bank of the UK, England, or the governor of the Bank of Canada. But that doesn't make him a businessman. That doesn't make him smart. That makes him well-placed. That makes him ideologically driven. That makes him possibly a chosen one. Why? Who knows? Who knows? Maybe it has something to do with Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. I don't know. But there's no way that Canada will vote these clowns in for another majority government or even a minority. Sean Fraser, the failed housing minister who quit politics about a month and a half ago, announced today that he's running again. Whoa! All of the same liberals coming back. The only one missing? Justin Trudeau. Getting back to Maxime Bernier. Maxime Bernier knows he can't even win one seat. He knows that his best chance to have won a seat would have been during the pandemic when he was standing up and he was doing all the right things, at least we thought. Well, he was doing the right things, maybe for the wrong reasons. I don't know. Now, if I do decide that I'm going to have him on the show, I'll ask him all of these hard questions, but I'm not sure that I want to do that. Why on earth would I want to rip a guy apart publicly? That doesn't seem like a nice thing to do, does it? But what I can tell you is that Max and the PPC are a non-factor moving forward. And David Shane's right. If the PPC, if Max, because it's a one-man show, let's be honest. I don't want to say the PPC. Who else is in the PPC? Do you know anybody else in the PPC? Can you name one other PPC? No. It's a Maxime Bernier cult. And if he doesn't throw his support in behind Poilievre, then he wants the Liberals to win. That's all there is to it. And all the PPC bros, you guys out there watching this right now, you can say everything you want, but the bottom line is there is no chance. You have none. Zero. And then the globalization monsters get to move a little bit quicker, a little bit further. So this is something I've been meaning to bring up for a while now and haven't. I'll have to get Katie back on the show at some point. Katie Pasitny of Universal Ostrich Farms in Edgewood, British Columbia. This is tragic. Universal Ostrich Farms seeks justice following tragic loss of their elder ostrich. Universal Ostrich Farms is deeply saddened to announce the tragic and senseless loss of Sarah, one of our beloved elder ostriches. On Friday, March 21st, Sarah, a healthy and cherished member of our herd, was shot and killed on our property. So somebody came in the middle of the night and shot this ostrich right in the head. There were some pictures that were released online. I've chosen not to show them. The RCMP were immediately notified, and we're now awaiting their investigation into the circumstances surrounding this violent act. At this time, we do not know who is responsible for Sarah's death, but we are fully committed to working with law enforcement to uncover the truth and ensure those responsible are held accountable. Katie Pasitny, daughter of co-owner Karen Esperson, said the loss of Sarah is not just a tragedy for our farm, but for everyone who values the safety of animals. We're focused on finding justice and preventing something like this from happening again. In addition to the emotional toll, we continue to incur significant legal costs as we work to prevent an unnecessary culling order issued by the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. We are incredibly grateful for their support, for the support we've received from our supporters, and we will continue to provide updates as new information becomes available. So that's Katie Pasitny. You can find her there on Facebook if you want to go and send out a friend request. This will be the last thing tonight, you guys. I did have a whole other thing planned for the extension tonight, but too much information. And I didn't even get to like 40% of it. You guys know Dr. Jonathan Turley comes up with some great information from time to time, but oh my God, so annoying. Squeaky voice. But, you know, I'm going to read something he wrote here because I found this to be interesting. Remembering that there was a poll out a couple of weeks ago showing that 46% of Canadians would jump at the chance to join the European Union. Remember that? 10% want to join the United States, but 46% for some reason want to join the European Union over there where they're arresting people for posting memes. Seriously, they're coming to your house. They're saying you posted something on Facebook that caused this person emotional distress, and you're got to come with us to the station. And they handcuff them and they drag them away from their families. Seriously. Oh, yeah, and they're boning up for another war as well. As a matter of fact, I think I had something about that. The German people are now starting to rebel against their chancellor who wants to accelerate all of this military spending because they want to keep that war with Ukraine going, don't forget, right? A new world order with European values, the unholy union of globalism and anti-free speech measures. Oh, yeah, that's another thing over there, too. They do not like free speech, not one bit. Below is my column in the Hill on the recent World Forum, where leaders gathered to declare a new world order with European values. So here's the column here. Emblazoned across banners and signs, the words "A New World Order with European Values" met the participants at this week's meeting of the World Forum in Berlin. Each year, leaders, executives, journalists, and academics gather to address the greatest threats facing humanity. This year, there was little doubt about what they view as the current threat: the resurgence of populism and free speech. In fairness to the forum, a new world order likely sounds more ominous for some civil libertarians than intended. While the European Union is a transnational government stretching across 27 nations, the organizers were referring to a shift of values away from the United States to Europe. As one of the few speakers at the forum who was calling for greater protections for free speech, I found it an unnerving message. Even putting aside the implications of the New World Order, the idea of building a world on today's European values is alarming for free speech. Free speech is in free fall in Europe, with ever-expanding speech regulations and criminal prosecutions, including for having toxic ideologies. Matter of fact, in talking to Dr. Yim last week, she told me that there is a commission. It's called the Conspiracy Commission, that you can report friends and family members to if they've been talking conspiracy nonsense. It's true. That's in Luxembourg. The World Forum has a powerful sense of fraternity, even and intimacy among leaders who see each other as a global elite. Mark Carney, right? This is what I was talking about last night. A cadre of enlightened minds protecting citizens from their own poor choices and habits. There's been a long push for transnational governing systems, and European figures see an opportunity created by the conflict with President Trump. The European Union is the model for such a Pax Europaea, or European peace. The problem is that this vision for a new Holy Roman Empire lacks a Charlemagne. More importantly, it lacks public support. The very notion of a new world order is chilling to many who oppose the rise of a globalist class with the rise of transnational governance in the European Union and beyond. This year, hang on, let me see if I can find a little thing here. This year, there is a sense of, panic among Europe's elite over the victory of Trump and the Republicans in the United States, as well as nationalist and populist European movements. For globalists, the late Tip O'Neill's rule that all politics is local is anathema. The European Union is intended to transcend national identities and priorities in favor of an inspired transnational government managed by an expert elite. Now we're talking about technocracy, which is something we've discussed as well on this show. The message was clear. The New World Order would be based on European, not American values. To rally the faithful to the cause, the organizers called upon two of the patron saints of the global elite, Bill and Hillary Clinton. President Clinton was even given an award as leader of the century. The Clintons were clearly in their element. Speaker after speaker denounced Trump and the rise of what they called autocrats and oligarchs. The irony was crushing. The European Union is based on the oligarchy of a ruling elite, kings and queens, for God's sakes. The World Forum even took time to celebrate billionaires from Bill Gates to George Soros for funding open societies and greater transnational powers. These people, they probably one of the heads of the Hydra. It's amazing that this is allowed to continue. The discussions focused on blunting the rise of far-right parties and stemming the flow of disinformation, quote unquote, that fosters such dissent. Outside of this rarefied environment, the Orwellian language would border on the humorous, protecting democracy from itself and limiting free speech to foster free speech. We take free speech from you so that we can save it. Yet one aspect of the forum was striking and refreshingly open. This year it became clear why transnational governance gravitates toward greater limits on free speech. Of course, all of this must be done in the name of democracy and free speech. There's a coded language that's now in vogue with the anti-free speech community. They never say the word censorship. They prefer content moderation. They don't call for limiting speech. Instead, they call for limiting false, hateful, or insightful speech. As for the rise of and you can bet that Carney is right in on this. As for the rise of opposing parties and figures, they're referred to as movements by low information voters, misled by disinformation. Of course, it's the government that will decide what are acceptable and unacceptable viewpoints. Very Orwellian indeed. That code was broken recently by Vice President J.D. Vance of the United States, who confronted the European allies in Munich to restore free speech. He stripped away the pretense and called out the censorship. With the right, and they actually cried about that too, like really cried after what Vance said to them. With the rise of populist groups, anti-immigration movements, and critics of European governance, there is a palpable challenge to EU authority. In that environment, free speech can be viewed as destabilizing because it spreads dissent and falsehoods. Where did I go here? About these figures and their agenda. Thus far, European peace has come at the price of silencing many of those voices, achieving the pretense of consensus through coerced silence. Transnational governance requires consent over a wide swath of territory. That means the control or cooperation of media and social media is essential to maintaining the consent of the governed. That's why free speech is in a tailspin in Europe, with ever-expanding speech regulations and criminal prosecutions. Yet it's difficult to get a free people to give up freedom. They have to be very afraid or very angry. One of the speakers was Maria A. Ressa, a journalist and Nobel laureate. I admire Ressa's courage as a journalist, but previously criticized her for anti-free speech positions. Ressa has struck out against critics who have denounced her for allegedly anti-Semitic views. She has warned that the right is using free speech and declaring, I will say it now, the fascists are coming. At the forum, Ressa again called for the audience of powerful leaders to prevent lies and dangerous disinformation from spreading worldwide. But the free speech movement has shown a surprising resilience these past few years. First, Elon Musk bought Twitter and dismantled its censorship apparatus, restoring free speech to the social media platform. More recently, Mark Zuckerberg announced that Meta would also restore free speech protections on Facebook and other platforms. And I don't know if you guys have noticed, but on Facebook, things seem to be a lot looser these past few weeks. At least that's my impression. In a shock to many, young Irish voters have been credited with killing a move to further expand the criminalization of speech to include xenophobia and the public dissemination or distribution of tracts, pictures, or other material from viewpoints barred under the law. Anti-free speech forces are gathering to push back on such trends. Indeed, Hillary Clinton has hardly been subtle about the dangers of free speech to the New World Order. After Musk bought Twitter with the intention of restoring free speech protections, Clinton called upon the European Union to use its infamous Digital Services Act to make Musk censor her fellow Americans. She's also suggested arresting those spreading disinformation. The European Union did precisely that by threatening Musk with confiscatory fines and even arrest unless he censored users. When Musk decided to interview Trump in this election, EU censors warned him that they would be watching for any disinformation. For many citizens, European governments does not exactly look like a triumph over oligarchs and autocrats. Indeed, the EU looks pretty oligarchic with its massive bureaucracy guided by a global elite and good billionaires like Soros and Gates. Citizens would be wise to look beyond the catchy themes and consider what Pax Europaea would truly mean to them. We have many shared values with our European allies. However, given the current laws limiting political speech, a new world order based on European values is hardly an inviting prospect for those who believe in robust democratic and free speech values. Jonathan Turley. And that's the show for tonight, my friends. Oops. Ghost in the machine. That's the show for tonight, my friends. I will be back tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. Want to thank Donald Best for coming on the show tonight. Hopefully we can get him back for a part 2 of that discussion at some point in the next week or so. He was strictly limited to 1 hour tonight because he had a very busy day ahead, and I wanted to respect that. So again, hopefully a part 2 can come next week. Back tomorrow night, 8 o'clock Central, for another Shadow at Night live stream. I love you all. I appreciate you all. I want to thank you all Access members for all of your support on the website, shadowdavis.com. Have a great night. Have a great sleep. And I will talk to you tomorrow. Bye for now.